The palace walls have seen scandal, but nothing like this. When King Charles III quietly signed a decree redirecting the priceless Spencer jewels to Catherine, Princess of Wales, it sent shockwaves through royal bloodlines. But behind the regal calm lay one man's heartbreak. Prince Harry, blindsided, devastated, and betrayed by a legacy he believed was his to share. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What began as a whisper in a private corridor erupted into a thunderous revelation that rippled far beyond the gates. The announcement moved like lightning, not through dignified announcements, but through leaks, murmurs, and carefully planted hints. One moment, senior aides were moving with rigid professionalism. The next, the firm felt like it had been shaken at its core. These were not just jewels, they were relics of memory, grief, and power. Pieces that once glimmered against Diana's quiet defiance were now being reassigned, not by sentiment, but by decree. A single signature, and the past was rewritten. Newspapers pounced, commentators speculated, the frenzy grew. Yet the person most wounded by the decision learned of it not in a family conversation, but as the headlines exploded across the world. For Harry, the humiliation was immediate and raw. To discover that the Spencer legacy had been redirected without his knowledge felt like a deliberate excision, as if an entire chapter of his mother's story had been torn away from him. Palace insiders confirmed what many feared: he hadn't even been informed before the world was allowed to judge, debate, and dissect. As the storm intensified, another moment fueled the fire. Catherine had quietly appeared at a private gathering, adorned with a discreet Spencer brooch. It wasn't ostentatious. It didn't need to be. The symbolism alone was enough to ignite speculation. Was this inheritance, or coronation by another means? Behind closed doors, the whispers sharpened. Some spoke of continuity and preservation, others of control. The jewels had become something larger, a declaration of where memory would reside and who would be permitted to embody Diana's legacy moving forward. Every rumor hinted at a deeper strategy: power, succession, a message cloaked in diamonds and history. And while the world debated etiquette, constitutional nuance, and royal protocol, the emotional fracture spread like a fault line beneath the palace foundations. Harry's silence was not emptiness, it was pressure building. Beneath the polished photographs, beneath the composed statements, lay the quiet devastation of a son who believed he had been erased from his mother's story. And as the institution tightened its grip on narrative and inheritance alike, it became clear that this was not just about jewels at all. It was about who would own the meaning of Diana herself, and who would be left standing outside, watching from the cold. As the world gasped, Harry's silence grew louder, but within palace corridors, his fury was already beginning to take shape. The Spencer jewels aren't just diamonds and gold, they're Diana's soul enshrined in sparkle. From the iconic tiara to the earrings she wore during her most defiant speeches, every piece tells a story. And now, the question isn't just who owns them, but who deserves them. Each stone within the Spencer legacy holds a memory, a moment, a message. The tiara worn by Diana on her wedding day was more than a regal ornament. It was a symbol of hope and heartbreak, of stepping into a world that ultimately betrayed her. The sapphire brooch she pinned during speeches had become a quiet rebellion, a hint of power Diana wore like armor. Her earrings, often subtle but always deliberate, were silent statements in times of distress. These weren't trinkets, they were a chronicle of her resilience. As the years passed, they became sacred relics of a woman who redefined what royalty meant to millions. That emotional weight, invisible yet unbearable, didn't fade with her. It settled over her sons. For Prince Harry, the jewels weren't family property. They were a spiritual tether, a link to a mother who protected him through both presence and absence. To Harry, the idea that Diana's treasures would be split equally between his wife and Catherine wasn't a matter of fairness. It was a matter of legacy fulfillment. He believed deeply that his mother wanted both her sons to carry her memory forward, not in name alone, but through these pieces. They were not just symbols of status, but fragments of her spirit. When Catherine began to wear them more consistently after her engagement to William, Harry saw it not as favoritism, but as fate. She wore them with grace, never with entitlement. She honored Diana's presence, never sought to replace it. The public admired her for it. Still, something shifted when Meghan entered the fold, and the contrast could no longer be ignored. Meghan, radiant and poised, rarely touched the Spencer heirlooms. In royal circles, the explanation was protocol. But in the shadows of the tabloids and behind palace curtains, it whispered of something else: distance, restriction, perhaps even rejection. The brooches, the earrings, the tiara, none were passed her way. Whether by design or omission, it was a signal that didn't go unnoticed. Some insiders called it practical, others called it cruel. Meghan, always measured in public, reportedly confided that it felt like a subtle message written in glittering stone. Royal historians, scholars and commentators began weighing in. What would Diana have wanted? Some argued she would have chosen Catherine steady, loyal, the embodiment of institutional trust. Others insisted Diana, the woman who carved her own path, would have embraced Meghan, a fellow outsider, as the true bearer of her rebellious legacy. But with no official will to clarify her wishes and no recorded statements to define her intent, speculation reigned. The jewels became contested ground not just of inheritance, but of identity. But just as history was being rewritten in diamonds, Harry's private world was collapsing under the weight of betrayal. He smiled for the cameras in Montecito, but behind closed doors, Prince Harry was shattered. Sources close to the Duke described sleepless nights, fury-laced calls, and a heartbreaking question he kept repeating: why her, not us? In the sanctuary of his California home, where he had hoped peace would finally settle, the news landed like a knife to the chest. The Spencer jewels, his mother's legacy, her spirit. Her armor had been handed to Catherine. And Harry, for all his devotion to Diana's memory, hadn't even been offered a conversation. What followed wasn't just disbelief, it was a storm. Those close to Harry described a man pacing through nights, replaying moments and picking at emotional scars that never fully healed. His inner circle, once quiet and careful, couldn't contain their fury. One aide reportedly broke down in tears, saying, "This wasn't just protocol, it was a betrayal." Meghan, protective by nature but seething beneath the surface, saw it not as royal tradition, but as a deliberate, calculated humiliation. To her, it was another line drawn in a war she never asked to fight, a signal that the firm had not only turned its back on them, but had rewritten the past in glitter and gold. She was said to be unflinching, pressing Harry to seek answers, to demand respect. And he did. But his efforts were met with silence. Eve. Rye's attempt to contact King Charles was reportedly intercepted. Filtered through layers of royal gatekeepers who offered vague reassurances and firm refusals. The message was clear: Harry was no longer part of the conversation. He was part of the problem. Leaked text messages now buried behind closed NDAs revealed Harry's desperation, the agony behind his calm public demeanor. In one emotional plea, he allegedly wrote, "I'm not asking as a duke, I'm asking as a son. Please explain." But no reply came, only echoes. That silence became louder than words, and in it Harry heard something far worse than rejection. He heard erasure. To him, this wasn't about jewelry. It was about memory, about meaning. The choice to give Catherine the Spencer legacy felt like rewriting history, one where Harry didn't exist, where his mother's love had somehow been monopolized, redirected, removed from his reach. And as the days passed, something even darker resurfaced. The tension between Harry and William, never healed, reopened like a wound in salt. There were no direct confrontations, but the weight of their silence spoke volumes. William had not intervened. He hadn't called. He hadn't questioned the decision, at least not in any visible way. For Harry, that silence from his brother, the only person who should have understood, was as devastating as the loss of the jewels themselves. It felt like a final crack in a bond already frayed by grief, distance, and years of unresolved hurt. As Harry mourned a decision made in silence, royal insiders hinted this wasn't about jewels, it was about legacy warfare. Catherine accepted the Spencer heirlooms with grace, but not without consequence. Behind the velvet doors, whispers suggested Camilla was livid watching history favor her stepdaughter-in-law, while she remained sidelined once again. To the public, Catherine's demeanor was the portrait of composure. There were no statements, no boasts, no celebratory appearances. She wore the jewels not as trophies, but as tributes, delicate acknowledgements of the legacy they carried. Yet beneath that calm exterior, sources say she felt the chill spreading through the palace air. With every polite curtsy and carefully placed smile, she walked a fine line. Not everyone viewed her as the rightful bearer of the Spencer name. Not everyone saw her as an innocent recipient. Some saw her as a symbol of preference, of power, of a narrative quietly rewritten. And no one, it seemed, felt that sting more deeply than Queen Camilla. At a recent state banquet, eyes were less on the speeches and more on the expressions. Camilla's glance toward Catherine was sharp enough to pierce glass. It lasted seconds, but royal observers trained to read every blink and breath picked it up like seismic activity. The Spencer brooch sparkled on Catherine's chest, and beside her, Camilla sat visibly tense. What was once dismissed as mere gossip erupted into speculation. Had Charles made a choice not just about inheritance, but about legacy placement? Was he, in this quiet redistribution of jewels, signaling something far larger? Insiders were quick to speak, but not on the record. It wasn't a snub to Harry, one longtime royal aide confided. It was a snub to Camilla. The words sent tremors across royal watch circles, because if true, it meant the power play was not about the sons Diana left behind, but the woman who followed her. Camilla, who had fought her way through scandal, media scrutiny, and public distrust to become queen consort, now stood in the shadow of a woman long gone but never forgotten. And it was Catherine, not Camilla, who was being entrusted with that shadow. For Catherine, the reality was complex. She was being praised by the press, adored by the public, hailed as the natural continuation of Diana's grace. But behind palace walls, admiration turned to resentment. Some staff described the atmosphere during official engagements as brittle. Tension hovered like smoke. Conversations were clipped, glances calculated. She had become, unwillingly perhaps, the epicenter of an unspoken rivalry. Camilla's allies were growing quiet but more watchful, and the more Catherine remained silent, the more her silence was interpreted as strength. Yet none of this, none of the carefully curated appearances, none of the tense banquets or backroom whispers fully explained Charles's decision. Because while the royal women stood on opposite ends of tradition and perception, the truth behind the king's motivations remained locked in history, tethered to a moment long buried from public view. But even as tensions brewed among the women, Charles's true motivation lay buried beneath a decades-old promise. What if this wasn't Charles's idea at all? A long-lost letter, believed to be written by Princess Diana herself, has resurfaced stirring questions of loyalty, interpretation, and hidden intentions. The revelation was nothing short of explosive. Tucked away among archived personal effects, preserved in time and sealed in secrecy, the letter appeared with the force of a royal ghost. Dated 1996, barely a year before Diana's death, it was written in her unmistakable hand. The contents were brief but searing. She wrote of a future queen who would carry the burden I once wore and made a pointed reference to my mother's tiara, hers by right, in time. No names, no instructions. But the implications were impossible to ignore. To those already aligned with Catherine's inheritance of the Spencer heirlooms, it was proof perhaps divine of a mother's foresight. To others, it was a dagger wrapped in velvet, designed to justify exclusion under the guise of prophecy. Within hours of the leak, a legal storm erupted. Could the letter be considered testamentary? Did it carry weight beyond memory? The Spencer family, already shaken by the controversy surrounding the jewels, fractured in their reactions. Some saw the letter as Diana's true will, unfiltered by royal protocol. Others called it speculative at best, a note scribbled in an emotional moment with no legal intent. Rumors began to swirl that a prominent faction within the Spencer circle was furious not just about the letter's timing, but about its usage. They believed it had been weaponized, deliberately revealed now to silence dissent and legitimize Charles's decision. And then came Meghan. According to insiders close to her camp, she was stunned by the letter's existence. What troubled her wasn't the handwriting or even the sentiment, but the suddenness. How had such a document never been mentioned, never discussed until now? Allegedly, she pushed for the letter to be verified by an independent body, away from royal influence. She questioned its authenticity, not because she believed it was forged, but because she feared it was being manipulated, used as a shield, used as a smokescreen. What if it had been taken out of context? What if it had never been meant to crown Catherine, but to heal the family? Now it was being wielded like a sword. Charles, when finally pressed, offered a statement that only deepened the mystery. He referred to the letter not as a command but as guidance, a word carefully chosen, weighed and polished. He respected Diana's wishes, he said, but he acted based on what is right for the monarchy. Critics pounced on that phrase. Was this truly about honoring Diana, or about shaping history to suit the present? The timing, the tone, the delivery, everything felt calculated. And yet, beneath the surface, something felt eerily unresolved. A whisper from the past had echo, a shout in the present. As the shadows of the past rose to the surface, the palace faced an even deeper fracture, one it could no longer conceal. He's the future king, but also Diana's son. When the news broke, William was torn in two. And behind his public calm, sources say he begged for unity, only to find himself isolated, even from his own brother. For William, the moment was agonizing. On one side stood the monarchy he was raised to defend, its structure, its traditions, its survival. On the other stood his brother, the only other person alive who had truly felt their mother's warmth and the sting of losing her. When the announcement about the Spencer heirlooms exploded into headlines, William said nothing. Not out of indifference, but paralysis. Those closest to him described him as grave, withdrawn, and deeply conflicted. He reportedly spent hours behind closed doors, deliberating with aides, pushing for options, searching for a solution that would not widen the already gaping chasm between him and Harry. But the machine of the crown moves swiftly, and William, despite his title, was no longer its master. A conversation between father and son leaked through royal corridors and whispered to journalists revealed William's growing unease. He had told Charles bluntly, "This will only deepen the divide." The words, while carefully delivered, carried the weight of desperation. William was no stranger to sacrifice, but the idea of sacrificing his brother for the sake of optics twisted something inside him. And yet when Harry remained silent, then distant, then clearly wounded, William knew the damage had already been done. Each attempt to reach out ended in more silence, more frost, more years lost between the two boys who had once walked behind their mother's coffin hand in hand. Catherine, ever the composed figure in public, became a quiet force behind the scenes. Sources say she tried to arrange a discreet meeting between herself and Meghan, hoping to ease tensions, or, at the very least, open a channel of empathy. But the effort stalled. Whether it was logistical blocks or emotional barriers, no one knows for sure. What is known is that no meeting ever took place, and in that vacuum, the speculation festered. The public praised William and Catherine for their steady appearances, their graceful participation in royal events. But the truth behind those smiles was brittle. Privately, William felt pulled in every direction by duty, by legacy, by guilt. Advisors, wary of any signs of internal dissent, reportedly leaned on William to fall in line with the official narrative. His image was too important, the future too precarious. He was told to support the Crown's decision unequivocally, and he did, in public at least. He stood beside Catherine, hand in hand, the picture of unity and confidence. But behind palace walls, that unity came at a cost. He had lost something, not the jewels, not the favour, but perhaps for the first time, he feared he had lost his brother forever. But as the brothers drifted further apart, Meghan was preparing for a move no one saw coming. The palace woke up to shock headlines. Meghan Markle had released a blistering open letter. In it, she invoked Diana's memory, condemned royal favoritism, and asked a single question that echoed worldwide: what kind of family buries a mother twice? The letter landed with the force of a thunderclap. Published through a major US outlet with international reach, it bypassed the traditional royal filters, sidestepped protocol, and spoke directly to the people. In its pages, Meghan didn't hold back. She framed the transfer of the Spencer heirlooms not just as a personal slight, but as a symbolic betrayal of everything Diana had stood for. She wrote of silence passed off as dignity, of selective memory cloaked in ceremony, and of the deep injustice in rewriting a legacy through inheritance. The fact that Catherine had been granted exclusive rights to the jewels wasn't, in Meghan's eyes, about tradition. It was about exclusion, a deliberate message, and one that Diana, she believed, would have never endorsed. Between the lines of the letter pulsed a searing undercurrent of accusation. Meghan never named Charles, never pointed directly at William, but the implications were impossible to ignore. She spoke of an institution that rewards compliance and punishes divergence, a monarchy that silences its inconvenient truths while polishing its favored narratives. And at the heart of it all was Diana once again trapped in the machinery of the crown, her memory bent and wielded to suit present-day agendas. Meghan's words were sharp but poetic, raw but calculated, the kind of message meant to leave a scar. The world reacted instantly. Some hailed her as courageous, finally voicing what many had whispered for years, that the royal family picks its heroines, and Catherine had been chosen at the cost of others. Others called the letter inflammatory, divisive, and deeply disrespectful of the monarchy's attempts at healing. The palace, true to form, refused to comment. But their silence only fed the storm. Reporters circled the palace gates. Headlines multiplied. Online forums erupted with debate. Public opinion fractured, supporters rallied, critics condemned. But no one could deny one thing. Meghan's voice had shattered the fragile calm. Inside Montecito, however, the reaction was less triumphant. According to insiders, Harry hadn't approved the letter's release. He was reportedly blindsided, caught between the pain he shared and the storm Meghan had unleashed. While he sympathized with her words, he feared the timing, the tone, the fallout. Their home, once a sanctuary from palace politics, turned tense. Meghan stood firm. She believed silence was no longer an option. But Harry, already wounded by the decision about the jewels, now found himself torn between allegiance and damage control. But while Meghan's words stirred the world, it was Charles's next decision that would stun everyone into silence. In a televised address marking the new year, King Charles III shocked the world. Not only did he confirm the Spencer jewels would remain with Catherine permanently, but he unveiled a chilling phrase: "The legacy of Diana belongs to the future queen." The nation held its breath as the words left his mouth. It wasn't just confirmation, it was finality. Charles, for all his reserve and calculated silence over the past months, had stepped forward with unmistakable clarity. The jewels, every piece tied to the name Spencer, to the memory of Diana, to the pain and pride of a nation, were now in Catherine's keeping forever. No more ambiguity, no more speculation. This was not an honorary loan or ceremonial gesture. It was a formal, irrevocable transfer. Legally binding, thoroughly documented, cemented into the royal record. A monarch's decision framed as duty but felt as declaration. For Harry, the impact was immediate and devastating. The man who had once carried his mother's torch across continents now found himself shut out of her legacy in the most public, pointed way possible. Sources close to the Sussex Circle described his reaction with one word: crushed. He allegedly withdrew from all communication, shutting down what little dialogue remained between himself and the palace. Those final threads of reconciliation, already frayed, were now severed. And while Meghan had drawn the world's attention with her letter, it was Charles who drove the final wedge without sentiment, without room for reversal. The Spencer family, once unified in grief, now stood divided in legacy. Some publicly applauded the king's decision, insisting it honor Diana's memory by securing it within the crown's future. Others sided with Harry, questioning whether Charles had co-opted her symbolism for institutional gain. The family fractures mirrored the public's confusion. Was this Diana's true wish, her essence channeled into a future queen? Or had her story been reshaped, her intentions reinterpreted to serve the crown's evolving narrative? As debates raged across headlines, airwaves, and royal forums, one thing became clear. The line between preservation and possession had blurred. Catherine, meanwhile, made no statements. She didn't need to. Days after the address, she attended a grand state banquet, poised and composed, the Spencer tiara gleaming beneath the chandeliers. It was the moment the monarchy had been orchestrating for months, a visual confirmation of continuity, legacy, and silent triumph. For her supporters, it was the rightful next chapter of Diana's lineage. For her critics, it was the image of a crown tightening its grip on history. Either way, the message had been delivered, and it was irreversible. But even as jewels gleamed and titles solidified, one final mystery lingered in the palace archives, a secret that could undo it all. A royal archivist stumbles upon a hidden velvet pouch. Inside, an unaccounted-for Spencer pendant and a handwritten note bearing Diana's signature. Was this the final piece of her true will, one no royal ever wanted uncovered? It began in quiet obscurity, beneath layers of forgotten documents and royal correspondence. The archivist, assigned to catalogue Diana's personal items for a digital legacy project, made the discovery no one had anticipated. Tucked deep in the lining of an old travel chest was a small velvet pouch, slightly worn, almost invisible to the eye. Inside, nestled like a secret waiting to speak, was a pendant clearly Spencer, unmistakably valuable, and yet curiously absent from all official inventories. But it wasn't the pendant that made the archivist freeze, it was the folded paper resting beneath it. A handwritten note, delicate but deliberate, with the unmistakable flourish of Diana's signature. The contents, just 8 lines long, carried enough weight to shift the foundation of the legacy war raging behind palace walls. "I leave this not to continue sorrow," the note read, "but to break it. A daughter shall one day wear this not to remember my pain, but to rewrite it." Those words, cryptic yet intimate, unleashed a storm. Was Diana referring to a biological daughter she never had, or a symbolic one? And more importantly, was this pendant meant to stay within the crown's control, or to be passed outside the royal lines altogether? Within hours, theories erupted like wildfire. Meghan, through sources close to her, allegedly claimed Diana had always intended something more for Lilibet, that this piece, long hidden, was never meant to be absorbed by the firm, but rather to empower the only living female descendant of Diana's bloodline outside the institution that once wounded her so deeply. The palace, caught off guard by the sudden leak, issued no official response. But the silence only emboldened speculation. Legal experts began dissecting the note's wording. Could this qualify as a final testament? If not legally binding, could it still be interpreted as an expressed wish with moral consequence? Quietly, whispers emerged of new legal proceedings, potentially reopening the entire Spencer inheritance question. If even one piece had been overlooked, or worse, concealed, and what else had been ignored or buried? And then came the division. Some in the Spencer family, already bruised by recent fractures, stood firmly behind Charles's decision, viewing the pendant as a beautiful but unrelated relic. Others, more emotionally attuned to Diana's phrasing, believed it to be the last thread of her unfiltered will. A whisper from beyond, untainted by royal filtration or institutional control. And now that whisper had turned into a roar, one that refused to be ignored. For Meghan and Harry, the discovery was fuel, not just for their emotional argument, but perhaps for a legal one. For the firm, it was an unanticipated twist in a war they believed had been resolved with Charles's declaration. The battle may have ended publicly, but in private, the story was far from over. The crown may sparkle on Catherine's head, but Diana's truth still whispers through hidden velvet, waiting to explode again. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.